Hello and welcome to another brand new episode of What the FinTech, the podcast from the team behind FinTech Futures and the Banking Technology magazine. My name is Paul Hindle, editor at FinTech Futures, and for this episode we're joined by George Maddaloni, CTO of Operations at payments giant Mastercard. George, welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks Paul for having me. Appreciate being here.
Excellent, that's great to have you here. Just to get started, we'd like to quickly let us know a bit more about yourself and the work you're doing at Mastercard.
I'm George Maddaloni. I am the CTO of Operations for Mastercard. Been at Mastercard about 4 years, and I lead a team that runs the Mastercard network and supports the technology platforms for every application, every product, and enables the employees make all of that come to life. Really get a great front row seat to a whole bunch of technology innovation that MasterCard has going on. And I've been in the financial technology business for actually a couple decades now, but got my start in technology first in grade school as a youngster programming, and then in Bell Labs actually as a technology intern there, where Bell Labs gave me my first opportunity to see what an unbox an internet router and see what that was in the 90s. And that's come full circle here at MasterCard with the network that I get to run and seeing that come to life and see it power commerce and what it can do for people. And it's truly a passion for me and certainly ties to what the company's mission is.
Excellent, sounds great. And again, great to have you here, and thanks so much for taking the time out to speak with us today. Hopefully we'll hear more about that as we go through the show. So on the show this week, we'll be discussing some of the key technology trends in the payment space and how Mastercard has looked to approach its own tech and innovation strategy to account for emerging technologies such as generative AI and tokenization. We'll also look to discuss the challenges of keeping one step ahead of fraudsters amid the emergence of new technologies and attack methods, and how to keep customers safe from scams and fraud, as well as how consumers' payment preferences have changed in recent years with the plethora of new digital payment methods available. That's all to come shortly, but as always, we'll open with our news and numbers segment. This is where our guest has gone out and found a news story featuring an interesting number to discuss and get us started. So, George, what have you brought along for us today?
Yeah, listen, I'm a big fan of numbers. Being an engineer, you love math. So from a numbers perspective, I'm here with the number 91, and CNBC released an article recently that featured MasterCard's effort to phase out manual card entry for online payments in Europe by 2030. $91 billion of online payment fraud are expected to happen by 2028. And we view the use of tokenization in e-commerce as something that can fight that fraud, that 91 billion, and really address it. And happy to talk more about tokenization later, but just a huge number when you think about the amount of impact that has on the economy and that we can have by fighting it. So 91 billion.
Yeah, I mean, we might as well tap into tokenization now that you've mentioned it for the news and numbers now. But I mean, it's been a big talking point on the podcast this year. I mean, how much potential do you think this technology has then? And what use cases, along with obviously what you're doing there at MasterCard, do you think will drive its adoption further?
Tokenization has been something MasterCard has been using in our network for well over a decade now. It's a huge way that we're able to gain and keep trust with our customers, and really one of the most powerful tools to fight fraud and privacy. We introduced this with capabilities like click to pay, card on file, and a digital wallet, or just contactless payments, quite frankly. And the tokenization concept is one that replaces the actual card number with a randomized token value. And that offers just a huge amount of security capability in that payment transaction. It actually makes the transaction more convenient for the customer, and it speeds it up. It actually makes the transaction go through faster, which a lot of people are surprised to see. So it's really been something that we view as a best-in-class way to perform transactions. We process over 3 billion of those tokenized transactions in a month. And we still see only 25% of e-commerce transactions today are tokenized. So there's lots of opportunity to do more and more in this space and continue to advance it, even though it's so mature. And we've been working with a lot of different businesses to make that happen. Probably one of the most exciting ones that we announced recently was with Mercedes-Benz, They're using a commerce platform and biometric authentication in car to unlock commerce and have a commerce platform so people have an easier and more secure way to pay in vehicle. So as we continue to deliver innovation and kind of look at how to make commerce faster, the push on tokenization is one that we've taken on. We think Europe is one of the regions that's really leading from this perspective. So that goes back to that announcement of pushing for 100% e-commerce tokenization by 2030.
Yeah, and obviously you mentioned how much safer it is there for the customer side of things, but do you see this becoming the kind of de facto for card payments and online payments moving forward? And do you think other players are going to follow suit there?
Yeah, I think we've certainly seen the uptick and the growth in using tokenization from a lot of different lenses. I think one of the key ways that it's taking hold is in transit systems around the world, of which I used one actually this morning as I come to our New York City technology hub and had a chance to tap on the transit system with my phone and initiate the way I pay for that ride to the office. It's super easy to do. And if you think about it, if you could do that and pay for your transit ride, then it just makes it that much easier to pay for lunch or pay for your coffee on the way into the office. And it's the kind of thing that just takes hold and it just makes it so much easier than pulling out your wallet using either cash or actually swiping a card. So I think we not only see other partners taking tokenization into contactless transactions, but we see consumers really wanting to use it more and more. And we've also worked, Netherlands, for example, have also embedded it and made an effort to have that same capability that you see it in New York City, but have that countrywide. And that's really a first for a whole country to go to contactless transactions for the transit system. So I think that's just one way we see not just other merchants taking it on, but it being embedded in an ecosystem and making not just consumer, but people's lives that much easier to get things done.
Welcome back to What the FinTech. Just a quick note from the FinTech Futures team with another important update for our tech-savvy listeners. The deadline for the Banking Tech Awards is coming up on August 9th. If your team has been working on groundbreaking banking technology, this is your chance to get recognized. So, submit your entries by August 9th to highlight your contributions to the industry. Go visit informerconnect.com/banking-tech-awards for more information. Don't miss out. Get those nominations in.
Given the rapid rate of technological change that we're seeing at the moment, how have you at Mastercard approached your tech and innovation strategy then to keep on top of new developments?
Technology at Mastercard and the strategy we have around technology is absolutely tied into our business strategy. One can't exist without the other. Each one of our products is a technological product. So we're constantly thinking about innovation and new ways of advancing those products. And specifically, we look at opportunities for adding speed and smarts into payments, making them more personalized, more intuitive, and of course, more secure. Our customers are constantly looking for an edge in terms of how to get things done and make the consumer a more effective consumer. So we're constantly looking at new technologies, and we were right there with 5G. We've been using AI for quite some time, cloud computing. All of these things have had a huge impact on commerce and payments, and we've incorporated them into our technology landscape. And really, our vision is to engineer the future of commerce, unleash the power that payments, data, and technology can have, as these things really are fundamental in people's lives now. And as we think about our strategy and how we, from a technology perspective, look at transformation and what bets and investments we're going to make in that space, we look at some of the key trends. First, we obviously want to look at what our customers are doing. There's a lot of diversification in our business between merchants, acquirers, issuers, and what their requirements are, and the breadth of their expectations continue to change. We look at our competition and the new entrants into our business and what their looking to do. And of course, our customers, right? New customers all the time have an impact on what those competitors are going to and what kind of disruption might be occurring in the business. From a regulatory perspective, the scrutiny is increasing. So we're constantly working with governments and thinking about what the significance of a new regulatory approach might be and how we're flexible to adopt those regulatory approaches. And then one of the most important thing is back to technology. The way we think that the waves of new technology are coming in closer and closer together, right? The sets of these waves. It's almost like things are getting faster all the time. So we take a conscious effort to look at those new technologies on a forward basis and see what kind of either disruption they could be useful for, or how could we change some of the products that we already have in place. So those are some of the things that we're dealing with, especially in light of kind of the rapid way that change is happening in our business.
Yeah, and that kind of leads us nicely into my next question, actually. Obviously, we've kind of touched on tokenization initially at the start of the podcast, but which emerging technologies in particular are you most focused on at the moment, and which do you think are going to have the biggest impact on payments going forward?
Yeah, I guess, you can't have a conversation today without talking about AI. So that's one, but let's hit that, probably three things: AI, cloud, and we think a lot about our edge of our network. So first and foremost, the Gen AI cycle, hype cycle has been huge. We've been working with AI capabilities for a number of years. And I think even we're recognized by Forbes in 2019 for something that we put in place that really powers our fraud engine called the Decision Management Platform. So it's a critical component of what we provide our customers, and we've been maturing that over time. And we're excited with what the generative AI techniques can bring to those capabilities. So that is certainly top of mind for us. Our cloud capabilities and what cloud's done with a bit more mainstream from a technological perspective, but it's really been an enabler for us on the network. Both we're able to connect to customers faster now because many more customers are in the cloud, but it's still, there's a wide variety of where customers stand. Some are still on the journey in terms of modernizing their banking platforms, where some are actually born in the cloud, and we can connect to them extremely quickly. Of course, it helps us innovate more by leveraging cloud for development capabilities. And if done right, it absolutely can help reduce infrastructure costs and allow us to bring things locally into regions where we need to bring them in a faster way than ever before. So we're certainly continuing to use cloud in a big way. And then the edge of our network is something that I think is really a marvel. We connect billions of consumers, over 6.6 billion cards, to 100 million acceptance points. And that connects to thousands of network access points that we manage and that my team manage every day. So that our edge of our network is global, very diverse, and we're constantly looking at new ways, including that one I just mentioned, by using the cloud. And then when you look at what things like our phones can do for us today, much less all the IoT capabilities that exist out there, there's a lot more data you can get from the edge. There's a lot more intelligence you can put in the edge to make decisioning much more distributed capability. So we see edge computing as another very interesting technology that can help us change the landscape and work on things like data sovereignty and solve some of the complexities around data movements, as well as just putting more and more intelligence closer to the consumer and closer to our customers. Those are three big areas for us.
Excellent. Yeah, sounds great. And I mean, generative AI, again, has been a hot topic for a while now. I mean, can you tell us a little bit more about how specifically you've been looking to tap into that technology, and what are the key emerging use cases there, both on the kind of business side and the consumer side?
Yeah, so touched on AI a bit before in terms of our focus for the past decade on fraud prevention and detection. And that is a huge area of our business. We launched a new service called Decision Intelligence Pro in that regard. And for businesses, what Decision Intelligence can do is really improve banks' ability to protect cardholders from fraudulent transactions and also mitigate for consumers what's known as false positives. So legitimate transactions that they're trying to make, which may have been incorrectly flagged as a fraudulent one. So this has two benefits. We obviously process these transactions at super instant capability. These decisions and scores are produced in milliseconds in terms of how we measure how fast we're operating this capability. And we actually process over 143 billion transactions through this system in a year. So we had to take a lot of thought in terms of how do we use generative techniques in the training process to look at the relationship between entities and apply those rules into our AI platform to make this, to kind of supercharge this decision intelligence platform. So that's one way. And I think we've seen improvements of, on average, about 20% in what the scoring of those transactions. And we've seen an elimination of about 85% of false positives. So good improvements in terms of what Gen AI can do for some of our products and allowed us to launch Decision Intelligence Pro. And then we also work with consumer organizations as well to help leverage generative AI techniques to create more personalization on product recommendations. So merchants can want to make recommendations to their consumers. We've created a product called Shopping Muse, which is enabled by generative AI to bring those personalized recommendations to the consumer. And that just is one of the value-added capabilities that we can give merchants. And Shopping Muse, in some of our early work with some partners, created like a 15 to 20% conversion rate increase than what people will get just from a traditional search. So I think the way in which we're able to use generative AI and the learning and training in our platforms is super exciting.
Excellent. Yeah, and obviously we've touched on fraud a little bit earlier in the podcast. I mean, the rise of AI has also seen fraudsters look to tap that technology as well to trick consumers with voice replication and deepfakes. How difficult is it to keep ahead of the fraudsters when it comes to these new attack methods with new technologies? And what kind of work have you been doing at Mastercard to protect people from scams and fraud?
I think as with any new technology, that you get very excited about, unfortunately, there's criminals and fraudsters out there that also want to use those technologies, and it leads to kind of this acceleration of some threats. And I've seen this throughout my career in different aspects, but we certainly are, quite frankly, on the lookout for it. And we see it playing out in real time with generative AI and kind of a corresponding rise of sophisticated, malicious things like deepfakes. So it's certainly something when you understand the technology, you see its power and its capability, and we all have to be vigilant and understand that it has the ability to create audio, video, visual, textual medium that bad actors can use to enable fraudulent activities, scams, disinformation. And I think the good part, if there is one on this, is it's also caused an increase in regulation in this space, or a discussion, a heavy dialogue in terms of how are we going to regulate generative AI. And we're actively working with many of those regulators around the world and government groups around the world, and even standards bodies on how do we address this and especially limit any of the impacts that exist within the commerce space. Again, our capability for DI Pro, I think, is one way in which we're bringing to life our principles and using things like neural networks that we built in-house to improve the detection of those fraudsters and what they're doing. So you got to fight with the tools, these new tools. And as I mentioned, we've seen an increase in improvement in fraud scores by 20%, but it can be up to 300%. So we've seen a variation there in terms of how good it is. And I think just the recommendation I have for others out there is you got to stay true to a set of principles. We established a set of data principles that we use, and everybody who knows AI and data go hand in hand. So really focusing on both the elimination of bias and bringing privacy and security into the data landscape is absolutely key. And we'll continue to push that with regulators and standards bodies around the world.
So I did a podcast earlier in the year focused on the maturation of quantum computing. And one of the concerns that always comes up with quantum is the potential cyber threats that might arise from that. What's your take on that? How can the financial service industry protect itself from possible quantum threats going forward?
Yeah, big topic and something we've been working on with a lot of partners, a lot of standards groups as well. The quantum computing capabilities does have the potential to redefine some of the key mechanisms that we've used within technology for a long time. So as you think about encryption and the methods we've used, Shor's algorithm, for a long period of time, the quantum computing capabilities are uniquely positioned to run the math that Shor's algorithm was based on and have, a threat towards our encryption techniques that are used. So this is something we've been looking at for quite a while. Mastercard in 2022 developed something called the Enhanced Contactless Specification, ECOS, which was built for EMB-Co, which is the method we use for contactless transactions, especially with mobile devices. So we issued that spec because it contained quantum-resistant mechanisms and really would allow us to future-proof some of those contactless security methods and ensure consumers were protected going forward. So we did that in partnership with a few, but mainly internally, but in partnership with others, really some of the standards bodies. The National Institute of Techniques has issued a series of very interesting ways to develop quantum resistant encryption. And we've also looked at that as well as a method called quantum key distribution to protect our network and the methods in which we transmit data from that edge into our core of our network. And we conducted a trial of how to both enable quantum resistant encryption and quantum key distribution within our network with partners such as Verizon and Cisco, and others, and we're able to demonstrate that we had the capability to leverage those techniques on our network. So I think something that the future of quantum in terms of the time horizon and when really quantum computing will be available to people is still quite uncertain and likely something you heard in your past podcast as well. But we're all, I think, as an industry and financial services, taking a hard look at it, looking at the ways in which we need to safeguard our networks and our consumers in those transactions, and really just making sure that we're going to be ready when those things happen. So I think that's the safeguarding side of quantum from a threat perspective that you asked about. I think, though, as well, we're also looking at quantum computing in terms of what can it do for our business. This is something that will go well beyond Moore's law in terms of computing power. So you look back to those generative AI capabilities, much less how we could use it in advanced investment and financial services products in the industry, risk management, portfolio management, things of that nature, and of course, fraud detection. So these are some of the things that we're partnered with a few groups to take a look at and how we might be able to get access to the technology as it's available and thinking through those use cases so that we're ready to advance our products as it becomes available.
Yeah, I feel like we could do another full episode just on this topic alone, but I'll move us on now. Maybe we can leave that one for next time. But payments is one of the leading use cases for open banking as well, which continues to pick up momentum. I mean, how do you see open banking evolving then moving forward, and how have you been looking to tap that technology as well?
Yeah, I think the consumer certainly wants a lot more choice in terms of payments and also insights into the data of what they're paying for. And those insights are the kinds of things people want in order to help their well-being from a financial perspective. And they want to be secure in terms of thinking about this data and where it's going. So as we've entered into open banking, that we're obviously looking at how do we let financial services firms and businesses and consumers safely share their financial data and make sure that there's permission-based mechanisms associated in the open banking world to enable that to happen. When you do that, I think it unlocks a huge set of innovative financial experiences for people. And back to the data principles I mentioned earlier, we believe in treating any personal data with decency. We believe that the consumer owns it and needs to control it. So when we're looking at open banking, we're looking at how can this benefit those consumers and how do we protect the data? So there's been these personal financial management tools around for a long time. And I think when you layer in both open banking and some of the AI techniques, it could be really powerful. Of course, we want to make sure that it's done with the right privacy and right security around it. So that's how we think about open banking.
Sounds great. And just to briefly wrap things up then, what does the future of the payment space then look like to you? And do you have any more initiatives in the pipeline at Mastercard you can tell us about?
Yeah, there's a lot more we could probably talk about in terms of the trends for the future of payments. It's an exciting business that I think has really got almost rocketed in the post-pandemic era as people have done way more transaction capability online, and we've seen the contactless capabilities continue to increase. So I think some of the trends that are exciting, we certainly have talked about tokenization, but the concepts like ubiquitous wallets, connected finance, and embedded finance, being inclusive in terms of the credit market is something we're very passionate about. So things like inclusion and conscious consumerism is certainly something and a topic that we want to make sure is a trend we look at. But probably the one I'll leave you with the most is what we call unleashing acceptance. We've seen the checkout and point of sale in the world really transform with new capabilities like 5G and making any device anywhere a payment device and an acceptance device. And we see merchants having a lot more flexibility with acceptance and where they can conduct business. And certainly that benefits the consumer, right? It makes it easier for people to do that. So I think the one I'll leave you with is in the next 2 years, we certainly expect a continued proliferation of acceptance options and interaction points for consumers that are really far reaching in terms of how they can help people, not just in terms of conducting transactions, but really can help people from a financial inclusion perspective, give people access to mass transit, like we talked about earlier, make a better experience when you go see events in stadiums, and eliminate kind of the wait time that people have around those things. And certainly that means a lot for our customers in terms of what they can do from a revenue perspective and how they can meet their customers' expectations.
Thanks again, George, for chatting with us today. To close out the podcast, we have our now infamous Fintech Jails. This is where we ask for an industry term, buzzword, or trend that you've seen or heard enough of, or of course, you can advocate to free one of the previously incarcerated terms. So what would be your selection for this week?
I'll go with freeing a term that I saw was in jail from before, and it's the word collaboration. In the business that we're operating in from a networking perspective, we're obviously dealing with partners all the time, and partners that help us enable the services that we provide, or partners where we're actually helping other companies or even governments towards their mission. And I think in the financial world, in high growth environments, you have to lean into partnerships and figure out, and really be collaboration as a muscle is something that you got to get really good at. And certainly in the technology world, we've seen that too. There's been a huge push around things like open contribution models in the technology landscape. And that is a great example of collaboration with intent to create something new in the technology world. So where I sit, when you think about financial services and technology, collaboration is sometimes tough for people to get right. And I think when you get it right, there's a lot of magic that can happen, and it can really fuel disruption and fuel innovation. So I'd advocate to free the word collaboration from your jail.
Excellent. Yeah, no, that sounds great. I think you've actually touched on the key there, which was the intent. I think when this was added to the jail initially added with the hope that it would eventually be challenged. But it was originally argued that, while obviously a positive in itself, collaboration needs that clearly defined actions that go along with it and the intent to make a change to really be effective. But I mean, is that something that you'd agree with as well, that shared vision, defined actions, and that openness to learn and fail together are all vital to collaboration?
Yeah, that's right. I think when you think about partnerships, you have to go into it with what is the mission, what is the vision that we're trying to accomplish here. You might not always agree with one another, but partnership is about figuring out how to make each other better. And back to collaboration as I think a muscle people have to have. It's not just like agreeing, it's about making each other better and pushing each other towards that vision and towards a mission that you're going to deliver something.
Excellent. Perfect. Well, yeah, I think you've made a great case there. And I'm happy to let this one out of the jail this week. Certainly think it's had long enough in there and is due for release now. And especially given how full our jail is now, it's always good that we've been releasing a few over the last few weeks. So happy for this one to be let out of the jail. And George, thank you so much again for talking with us on the podcast today. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks for having me. Really appreciate it.
Well, that's all we have time for this week. Thanks, of course, to George for joining me. As for FinTech Futures, you can find us online at fintechfutures.com, on X at FinTech Futures, and of course on LinkedIn. If you like this podcast and our other episodes, you can subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, SoundCloud, or your favorite podcasting service to get notified about future episodes. Thanks as well to Rama for editing this podcast. You can check them out at rama.tv. As always, thank you very much for your support, and we'll see you soon for another episode of What the FinTech. But until then, goodbye.